Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pixel Classroom podcast. I am, of course, your host, Ryan Reed here, and thank you for joining us on the recording of this on a nice Saturday afternoon here. Hopefully, in our part of the world, there's actually some nice sun outside. It's a nice, wonderful 48 degrees. Sounds really good. So on that note, too, I have a wonderful guest here today. We've been trying to get this for a couple weeks. We've had some delays. Luckily, we worked it out, and this has just gone absolutely fantastic. So I'm really happy to bring somebody who's really the set of personalized learning and really has a little area here of expertise, and she's going to share everything else too. So my guest today, she has been, of course, she is the founder of Making Learning Personal and co-author of bestsellers such as Make Learning Personal and How to Personalize Learning. She is an innovative thought leader, independent speaker, professional developer, has worked with the Universal Design of Learning, so UDL consultant for the last 30 years. She's been a K through 12 administrator and consultant, and she's very passionate about empowering all learners with thriving in EDU. She left a couple years ago to start her own edupreneur, or I should say EDUpreneur business here today. So I'm going to welcome the one and only Kathleen McClaskey to the Pixel Classroom podcast. And there she is. Hey,
wow. Thank you so much, Ryan, for inviting me today.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for being on here. Like I said, we ran into some delays, as I said at the beginning here, but now here you are. And I know there's a lot more to your stories. We were talking here before the podcast started. So why don't you tell the audience here, the whopping right now 0 views on the live stream, but although I know it's going to be about 40 to 80 people listening to this on the audio here in about a week. So go ahead and who is Kathleen McClaskey?
Wow. Who is she? Wow. Well, let me just say to you this, is that once I became an entrepreneur, you say edupreneur, but virtually I could have never planned this journey over the last 22 years of my life. But early on, I was an educator and a K-12 administrator. I was that first computer teacher you probably had in middle school. And did that. I was tech integrator, but I was a tech director for a number of years in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And then I decided I can do a whole lot more outside of the K-12 arena and environment. And so that I wanted to make a great impact. And what I did is I developed the programs for teachers to really how to use the technologies they had really on their desktop to support the diverse learner in the classroom. And my focus over the last 22 years is really how can we actually use the tools that are accessible to us to really kids to be able to become more independent and self-directed in their learning. And so I've been on that warpath for quite a few years and still am. And it's really a passion of mine. And I can just say to you, follow your passion to find your purpose. And when you have a purpose in life, there's nothing greater, by the way, than having purpose and living that every day.
I think that's a good message. It's very interesting how you talked about how you worked on that and became a tech director. Similar to mine, I did not start as a classroom teacher. I was a technology facilitator for a private school using the iPads, and we already had tools out there that people were aware of but weren't using it. Time grew, before the Google movement and other things, and later personalized online Schoology, all that fun. It was so amazing. Like when I left there, I went to another school. It was like complete opposite. Like they knew the tools they used and so forth, but they were having such a problem, like where it would have to adapt. Like they had their programs, they had their IXL, and they had their, EdBrones, they had their setups, but there was really no way, like, where do we go next with this? And that was a lot of my job there before I went to my previous district, where I kind of came in and everybody had these tools and nobody was using them. And then they come to my classroom and the kids were like, why Mr. Reed is doing all these stuff. Why aren't we doing it? Like, we're not doing it. We use Google Classroom, but why aren't you doing this? Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that existed. That's how it was.
Well, I have to say just briefly is I actually started my career in computers and ed 40 years ago. That's 40. And I started off with Apple IIe's, and I did incredible stuff with Apple IIe's. I created learner-centered classrooms back in the late 80s. Kids became very self-directed in their learning. Kids knew how to program in Logo. They knew how to create animations in Logo. Those are the things I did in the late 80s. And it sort of set the stage for me to move into this whole area of personalized learning, because I really believe that I think we've been just doing it all wrong all these years in education, where we really haven't empowered the kid to really understand how they learn. But how we got into personalized learning, we had this earlier conversation, is that and back in 2011, I was reading about personalized learning, and I saw this as really the next big thing in education, and it was, and still is. But I think that a lot of people just don't have a real good understanding of what personalized learning is. So I'm gonna sort of read you a quote that I created about, let's see, how many years ago is it now? Oh, 6 years ago. So,
Not quite
per,
a decade.
but 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 the thing is that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is, and it's not, personalized learning is not what is done to the learner or about tailoring the learning. It's about helping each learner to identify and develop the skills they need to support and enhance their own learning, so that agency and self-advocacy can be realized. So, uh, learning is personal. Let's
Oh
face
yeah.
it, right? And so, what we want kids to be able to do is we want them, first of all, to truly understand about the strengths and challenges in their learning. And I've really developed a process around that. And but the thing is, we want them to be able to support their own learning. Okay, give them the skills and the strategies so they have a lifelong practice around learning. Can you imagine talking about a learning practice? I mean, that's what it's all about. And the thing is that we all do learn differently, but we have so many great tools today, right? To be able to be able to support the things that you may not be good at, right? Or things that you may be good at and want to get better at, right? But we want kids to have that voice around their learning, to be able to articulate those things about themselves, because we want kids to, be able to have that positive self-talk in the end, because the stories that we tell ourselves is what we believe about ourselves. And I know that you have kids, and this is like one of the things that educators don't talk about, right? Is that kids sitting in the classroom, when they can't do something and they're comparing themselves to each other, they're talking to themselves all the time. Well, that negative self-talk that goes on, saying I can't do this, or this one's better than I am, or whatever is happening in their mind, is that they're struggling with part of their learning. And that goes on for a very, very long time. This is what kids end up believing about themselves, that they can't do something, right? I can't do this, or I can't do that. But we want kids to be able to talk about things instead of doing all that self-talk. It's that self-image is everything. And you really you can really go places when you have that sort of that positive self-image, and saying, you know what, I'm not so good at this, but I would really like to learn how to use this particular tool to help me. Okay, can you imagine kids self-advocating in that way? So when I talk about this self-advocacy, that's the secret sauce. um, if kids cannot self-advocate, they can't survive in college. Okay, the kid that struggles with something in the K to 12 environment or in high school, right, basically goes to college, and if they don't know how to self-advocate, they're doomed. If
Yeah,
they
and the same as even for ones that don't even go to college, or they go to work for a
Right,
company, or they even do the
right,
military, when they cannot
right,
self-advocate for their own
right,
skills, that
right.
turns into an issue. I mean, I knew a student years ago, and that's how it was. And he got into the set of students like, well, I can't do this, so since you're my friends, you can't do it either because you struggle, and we should all go face first down together. And then a couple of them, as they got out of school, and like I said, this was years ago. I'm like, hard to believe. I'm like, oh geez, that was 9 years ago. I'm thinking of these exact
Mhm.
same students, and two of them I actually recently talked to, because I found them on social media. And they just say, hey, you were one of my favorite instructors Mr. Reed. I'm like, oh, thanks. But one of them I think was great is he went to community college and he decided to get a certificate. He was working for his company, his family farm, which was great. But he realized once he got to community college for a because he had to get a certified. It was just, that was required. He couldn't operate without the certification. That was a state requirement. He had to do it. But he started advocating for himself to get himself to pass that. And he had that positive environment from his family, but he had it from a couple other friends he had then met there in school.
Right.
And as a result, he did that. And I said I was very proud of him because the years before that, he wouldn't not only advocate, but he let others advocate for him who did not really voice it. Was more of like, hey, we've been friends and I'm doing horrible. You've got to do horrible with me. And it's like, no, see, once you do that, you're not self-advocating, you're alternating. And once you alternate for somebody else's, you're getting trouble. I mean, sometimes it can be positive. Sometimes it can be a positive influence and sometimes it can be a negative. That was an example of he didn't know how to self-advocate then. So then when he was left on it, he was kind of confused. Luckily, he fell into a group that did help him to self-advocate. And his teacher did the same.
Yeah, so back about I think, let me think how many years ago it is. It's 12 years ago again. Is I really started thinking, I've been a student of UDL since 1999, so I've probably been using UDL longer than most people and most of the listeners here. But when I was in personalized learning and we were talking about the learner and being the focus, I basically, with all that experience, and I taught graduate schools around UDL, and some of the things that teachers really struggled with was all the language in UDL. So I said, you know what, we just need to create a common language around UDL so that everybody can use it and they can actually communicate with each other. So I created this thing called the UDL lens of access, engage, and express.
Mm-hmm.
And what that is that, access is really how we access and process information into usable knowledge. And everybody does that every day, right? And how engage is how we engage with content, concepts, and ideas, right? And express is really how we express and take action around our learning. And we have strengths and challenges. So in the second publication on how to personalize learning, we have these charts called the access, engage, and express charts. And kids can actually use that. But I do want to tell you to the audience out there is that I created this thing called Empower the Learner profile, and it uses the UDL lens around how I learn. Okay, but the Empower the Learner profile is who I am, how I learn, and what I aspire to be. Okay, and in that, kids actually take a look at their learning, of their strengths and challenges around their learning. About a couple of years ago, Book Creator contacted me and they wanted to take the Empower the Learner profile and create a template in Book Creator, and it is there. So for the audience who wants to try that out, it's a wow. It's because for the first time, kids can really talk about their strengths and their challenges in their learning. And so it becomes that jumping off point for kids to begin those conversations that are so needed. And what we want kids to be able to do is that we want them, again, to be okay with who they are, how they learn, both their strengths and challenges, so they can take action around their learning, right? So how this goes about is that, if you can't talk about something, you can't take action, right? You have
Yeah,
to
I
talk about things. And so, and those are the things that we really want our own children and all the kids we interact with, right? Because and so we've really created this culture in the classroom to be sometimes to be highly secretive, especially around your challenges. And this gives sort of opens up that door to have those conversations and saying, you know what, I'm not good at this, but I would really like to learn how to do this, or I like to be able to use this particular tool. Or I'm really good at this, and I really want to get better at it. And can you imagine that kids are talking in this way, being so that proactive, self-advocating individual, right? And it actually starts pretty young. I just worked with a group of teachers that were K-1 teachers. And so I've created a brand new charts that have graphical representation for that younger child. All right. And because the ones in the publication don't, and Empower the Learner still uses the old Access, Engage, and Express charts, which are really excellent. But for the younger learner, they really need a graphical representation. So kids are now talking about their learning, right? And so I was thrilled that the principal and her K-1 staff wanted to learn more about how to create and work on the profile, the Empower the Learner profile with their very young learners. And they said it's really wonderful. The kids really do like to talk about those things. And what it is it's, but you know, what the struggle is all the time is all the academics, all the testing that goes on, even in the K-1 level, they basically have so little time to do these pieces. And, you know, I like to give a shout out to teachers out there. You know, you have to find that time to really empower children to be able to talk about their learning. I mean, let's face it, that's why they're in school, right? And what an advantage for teachers to know these things about the kids in their classroom. So I just want to put that out there. So you can go to empowerthelearner.com and read some blogs that I've written there. And but I work with both educators and parent groups, and I'm now working with two organizations in Maine, the Autism Society of Maine and Maine Parent Federation, and we have developed the Empower the Learner profile for the neurodivergent learner. And it's unbelievably powerful. We're training parents, and this year we're going to be working with kids, neurodivergent learners in Maine, to really develop their profile. So,
Yeah, I
anyway.
mean, like I said, on the video version here, like I said, I'm showing the website. And like I said, for the audio, it'll be on the show notes here. But yeah, I mean, there's
Right.
a lot right on here. I mean, look, I mean, right now, I mean, I was looking right now at later on the change to a STEM, and one thing we definitely talked about was the UDL and being inclusive, because like the other one's a very
Right.
school district. I mean, my current school district is diverse. It's not hugely diverse, but the other one is very diverse. And then you're in another school district, which is not so diverse. I mean, there's some diversity, but not huge. And that is a one thing that they definitely, these various districts do look at, is exactly due to those populace. Like, really, what does that look like right here? Visual, I've got the right here with the Empower Learners, like the identity, the
Right.
skill outcomes.
Right.
Like, who am I? How do I learn? What do I
Right.
aspire to be? It's like me. It's like I tell people I'm a crafter. I mean, people see me in 3D printing. People see me in perler beads. Then people see me gardening. I'm like, I'm a crafter. I craft things in my learning.
Right.
It's
Right.
something I can turn it into. But what are my skills? Like, right now I'm teaching web design too. I've gone back to old HTML coding to teach them shell code.
Wow.
We were doing drag and drop. But, part of me, it's very like I'm reading it, I'm watching our videos, and I'm typing it out in the little videos for my students. I was just doing 4 episodes like early this morning after breakfast, because it's like, let me get this done now, because I got a weird schedule coming up the next 2 weeks. But as I was doing it, like I was actually recasting and learning it. So I was explaining in language that they would understand, even though they're going to have the cheat, and I'm making them make a cheat cage in Notepad++. But a lot of these kids, I know the other day, last week when I was showing them the first thing I tagged, like, oh yeah, I've done that, where I look at the source code just for fun, and that's coding. I'm like, it's coding, but you're just looking at what's already code. You're not really doing anything, but that's a skill. Like, you can visualize. But I said, what does that really mean? They're like, I don't know what that means. Like, what does a P usually stand for? And I went, page. I'm like, no, not a page. Think smaller. Oh, a paragraph. I'm like, exactly. So it's like they understood the skill, but they don't understand how that works. Like years later, like when I was like late 90s, I was making my old Spider-Man website, or working on my Thunderbolts website. I was doing a lot of this code, and a lot of it I understood, like, yeah, it stands for image, source, SRC is source. But I never understood the difference between LI and BR and H1. And then I realized years like, oh, header 1. That's making sense why that was bigger. Or BR was the page breaks. Because some people would see my website, like, your website's so well organized. I'm like, it is? Okay, well, thank you. And part of the times, like, I don't think it was until like 2 years later, I really knew what I was doing. Because even back then, it's like like before Google, you couldn't really look up sources. I have a Dreamweaver, old, textbook from 2 years ago I got from a teacher. I use this as reference. And then I bought an old guide. It's downstairs in my basement, but it shows old code tags. And some of them I was reading going, oh yeah, I remember that. And I'm like, oh, that's what that stood for. Now it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, so a little bit of background to the Empower Learner profile. It's an offshoot of what was in the book called How to Personalize Learning. But I started doing a lot more research around identity and the whole child. And identity really is, foundational, in social and emotional learning.
Mm,
But identity, I see identity as the on ramp to learner empowerment, because once kids have that sort of knowledge about themselves and the way that they learn and are able to share those things, but also to let people also know the things that they aspire to be. We want to know those things really even early on, because I will tell you that most of us could actually probably developed hopes and dreams early on, right? I mean, I recall myself, I was think 9 years old, and the only exposure I had to sort of woman role models was actually in books.
mm,
So one of the women that I always admire was Amelia Earhart, and here she came up again actually the last couple of weeks when they were searching for that plane still. But here's a woman that was really incredibly brave, and a real standout back then, um, and I want people to know that, and kids to know that, really they can really be anyone they want to be. There really isn't anything that should ever hold a child back in doing what they want to do, okay, and try things out. So, but understanding who you are and how you learn is really like the very first step to empowerment. And if we want kids to develop agency in their learning, in other words, they can actually support and enhance their own learning, right? And make decisions around their learning. Then we also want them to be able to share out, the things that they aspire to be.
yeah, and I
Um,
I think that's an extremely important. I mean, because I mean, and I've even told kids too. I thought different at 16. I thought different at 18. 18, I had a very huge thing what I was going to do with my life, but I saw
right.
some background. But
Yeah.
once I turned 22 and I left, it was kind of like this isn't. I mean, I did things like I said, but it didn't quite work there. So I restructured. I mean, I switched education at 30 after doing healthcare because I had worked stores, I'd worked areas, and I was fine doing that business aspects. But there were some things I didn't really do. But there was a lot of stuff that was key to me: the computerizations, the marketing. It was all there, and I'd building it for a while. And that's something
Right.
I took to my classroom. I had a lot of people that told me, like, I think you missed your calling as a social studies or history teacher because you're really good at telling stories. You know how to market it. You love history, modern, past, or you look at little bits and pieces, or like you're great with pop culture and whatnot.
So
And it was all there.
yeah.
But it was
So
very discouraged for me to actually explore that. Like, that's who you are, but that doesn't work good in the classroom. And I had some very good teachers. I had some teachers that wasn't part of the curriculum to really look who I was as a learner.
well, the thing is that kids that actually that struggle in school, kids with learning disabilities. One of the things that sort of motivated me was really my own children. And 1 in 5 kids in the classroom has considerable challenges in learning, and a lot of it is around dyslexia and of course learning disabilities. And a lot of times those kids actually don't ever end up either learning how to read, or they are challenged even doing daily academic work. Okay, so one of the things I wanted is that I wanted those kids to be able to have a voice around themselves, voice around their learning. And that was my motivation. And I knew, my background in educational technology, I knew there was just a set of tools, that could support kids to become more independent and self-directed. And what it is actually we end up really a lot of times crippling children even more, and because we create so many accommodations and changes and stuff instead of focusing on the learner and helping them develop the skills, right? And practices around their learning, and the tools are the key uh,
Yes.
most of the time. And if we can help, and the problem is I think that a lot of times, educators may not know about all the different types of tools, but now we are going to have so much more with AI around the corner, and that's here. And I will tell you that the tools are going to get better. I mean, your own phone is has tons of accessibility, features in it already, right? I mean, it's not like it was 20 years ago, even 30 years ago, or even 10 years ago. And kids now, I mean, have a set of tools to be able to get access to content much easier, whether it be online or an electronic book or whatever. And kids actually can develop skills. But the thing is we want kids to be able to talk about their learning again around um, with this common language, so they can communicate with parents, they can communicate with teachers. So that whole UDL lens of access, engage, and express around how I learn was highly intentional. And I talk about strengths and challenges. And I never use the word weakness. It's just the most horrible word. It is about challenges because each one of us has variability in our learning. And some kids have it to a certain degree, that really actually becomes a barrier to learning. Uh, and but we want kids to be able to talk about it because a lot of times we're telling kids, right? You need to
Yes.
do this or you need to do that. So the worst word in the ever to use in the classroom is the word you. As soon as you say you need to do this or you need to do that. So what you remove, two things you remove automatically right off the bat is motivation and ownership. Gone, completely gone as soon as say the word you. This is the reason why I want kids to be able to talk about themselves in ways, they're talking about I, okay? And we're not, and they're advocating. We're not telling kids, well, you need to do this or you need to do that next. That that's like the worst thing you can say in the classroom.
Yeah, and
Um,
and it's point. I mean, I've been guilty as the next person. I've also had it where I've tried to help them worse the personalized learning. They won't do it, and I've changed the you to we because like we're all doing this. I mean, some of us are going to
agree,
have better strengths.
agree,
Some are going to have
right?
weaknesses. Like I was doing when we were going over the movie All the Queen's Horses, which is about Rita Crunwell, and I said, we're doing the Cornell notes, which people are like, oh, what's the Cornell? And I was like, well, it was developed due to medical students. But what happens is they were taking notes, but they weren't applying those notes to it.
Right.
So, and he knew everybody took notes differently. The person who designed the Cornell notes said so. So what he did is he set up a basic template, and he said, I do my notes this way. And then he said some
Right.
students that did it visually, like I can see it if I draw it versus if I write like, okay, this is what
Correct.
the word means. But then what he
Right.
would do is then they would take those chapters, and he said, now take those notes out and now make it part of you. What's going to make you taking all those information, just look in the book and those notes, what's it going to make you to do this, to dissect this? Or what's it going to make you so you get the chemical reaction we're supposed to get because you did X, Y, and Z? Or why is the chemical? And that's when it started learning that more personal, because some students did it completely different. And
Right.
someone like, hey, can you tell me how you did that? Because I'm doing the exact same thing. This is how I took the notes. And then they're like, well, did you do this? I like draw a picture of like a measuring cup. And he went, I didn't think of that.
Right. So, so the thing is that it's all the idea of being able to communicate around your learning. And once you actually do that, and I have to tell you that there's an educator out in Wisconsin who took that second book on how to personalize learning, and she took it to heart, and she's a special ed teacher out in Wisconsin, Elbrook, Wisconsin. And she basically sat down with her kids before the beginning of the school year, before they entered high school, and started them off with a learner profile. So the kids could actually talk about those things and understand themselves. And in the end, those kids ended up not only really developing what's called the one pager, because you virtually can put all this information on one page. Can you imagine having that piece of paper, right?
Right.
Right. And then they would self-advocate. But here's the other things that they would do is they went and they led their own IEP meetings to tell the adults in that room what
Mm-hmm.
they needed to learn. Okay. And so those kids, became, you know, great self-advocates. More kids in the school, by the way, want to do the learner profile because they love the idea that I can put everything like on this one page. I can talk about my strengths and challenges in my learning from this point of view. And the thing is that the kids loved it. All the kids, many of those kids did. But can you imagine kids doing this profile, the Empower the Learner profile, and then leading their own IEP meetings. And that is like the greatest experience for self-advocacy that you could possibly have, right? And they had the one pager, which became the talking points for them. And they had a whole slide deck, and they presented their learner profile to let the adults know what they needed to learn. And so that's really the wonders around that. And I would just want to mention her name is Andali Espinosa in Elmbrook, Wisconsin, and she's an absolutely fabulous teacher, and who really took it to a level that I would have never expected. And I have to give her credit for the one pager that she created out of that process.
Well, usually we do an air horn, especially with Judge Chorus is in Innovative Learner. But in this case, since I give her a round of applause. There we go.
Okay.
Because she actually accomplished getting that one pager together.
Right. Oh yeah. It was
the applause. There we go.
The thing is that I've met in my career the most wonderful educators you can even imagine, and I've traveled all over the world, presented all these ideas everywhere, and we were talking before we get on around what's called the PDI chart, which was created 12 years ago, and it's called personalization versus differentiation versus individualization. And within the first year, it was already translated in Portuguese. We had heard from educators in Brazil. And a couple of years ago, this group in Europe that oversees the professional development for European educators virtually translated that chart into multiple languages, I think like 9 different languages. And I've actually posted that on my website, on the Make Learning Personal website. That's KathleenMcClaskey.com. Thank you for putting that up.
Yeah, I was like, we were looking at it earlier, but I'm like, I think I jumped the curve a little bit earlier. Like, I know,
but
so there it is there for all our visual viewers there again.
Yeah, so the PDI chart is actually probably one of the most used documents around the world, and it's been in tons of publications, a lot of academic publications. It was actually referred by the US DOE, Department of Educational Technology, and how that came about is that way back in, I think it was in the late, maybe it was like 2010 or whatever, but they put out the EdTech plan, right? The National EdTech plan.
I do remember that.
And basically, they were talking about these terms from the perspective of instruction. And my colleague and I basically said, we need to really create this from the perspective of the learner. What does that mean for the learner? Personalization versus differentiation versus individualization, And so we took that and we created that chart, and that was done in January of 2012. And one winter afternoon here, I live here in New Hampshire, and my colleague lived out in California, and that was our claim to fame. And people started using that, first of all, with educators, with parents, so they would understand. And educators started using it, and then we got requests to get it translated in all these different languages, and we've actually heard from people actually on 6 continents that have used that chart. Yeah. So the thing is, yes.
Yeah, I remember seeing that myself when I was starting my doctorate work, and they're like, we have to go over. I mean, now it's like huge thing. And then here I'm talking to the person who designed it a decade later. And it's like, the 32-year-old, like, oh, I'm going to doctorate here. I've lost my mind. I'm like, oh, this is good to learn. And then here I am, 2024, and I'm talking to the person to help make it. That's been part of my career for the last 10 years.
Here's the thing is that these terms again were so confusing. You see,
right.
People don't know the difference between personalization and differentiation and individualization. And so what we did is we tried to make that clearer in a one pager, right? So that people could use that. And it's in our second book, and we have an activity around it for educators to use. But you actually have to have these conversations, like always remember that personalized learning starts with the learner. And And if we don't focus on who the learners are, I think that we'll just continue to struggle, and kids will continue to struggle. And what you want to be able to do is that you want kids to, again, uh, be okay to have positive self-talk around who they are and how they learn, and that they have conversations about it. And you can really start off, like I was saying to you, really at any age. And if you have access to Book Creator, there's a template right there. Empower the Learning template.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, it is. I mean, I used to use Book Creator. I mean, one thing I do for a couple of my classes, I'll be doing for my business law class here next week, is we use Wakelet, and I actually have them put their pieces together. In marketing, they have
right,
to keep an actual marketing portfolio. And I said, and I've shown
right.
them, and some of the kids will sometimes like, well, why does that have to be there? I'm like, because it's showing you what you learn. Then, they had a presentation. I'm like, guys, back in my day, I had to print this stuff out. I had to put in a 3-ring binder, and then one day
Right.
semester, I had to get up there for 10 minutes in a 2-hour class. I would go, somebody would have to write down my checks. Then the next person would go there. And then they're like looking at me like, and that took you 2 hours? Like, no, that didn't take me 2 hours. That would be 1 hour for just all of us to go. The next hour, we would all have to go in and talk about that. And our teacher talked about like what they said about it. Like, they would hold it and they would be like, I understand because you're showing me right here, you have a strength in visualization in market, or you have a thing, you know your numbers, like you could balance a budget in 2 seconds for the next, summer fest, like in 2 seconds, you understand that, but you don't have a strength in X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, I'm not a visual person, I'm a numbers guy. So, they put it here, but it personalized it to us. And we differentiated it enough too, because he knew not everybody was different. Like he saw me as more of like, I'm a visionary, I'm a designer, and I know the numbers. But then I had a classmate, he knew the numbers, he knew the logistics, and he knew time management like the back of his hand. Like, yeah, and that person, that will take about 20 minutes unless they're busy at this time of the day. So I go on a Thursday, that should be at the radio station by Thursday. So that could be on for Friday night show. And you were just like, I wish I could schedule it that good, but it was, but then some of us learned from that to schedule it, learn our own scheduling. So we personalize that too. But I found that was best for students to reflect on. That I learned a long time ago. Reflection was very good for students.
Oh, for sure. This Empower Learner profile would be a great tool for kids to do learner-led conferences, and be able to talk about themselves as learners in this way, and then to be able to say, the things that, reflecting on, how they learn, but reflecting on, both the strengths that they have and their challenges. Now, in the second publication, How to Personalize Learning, it's really the learner profile is really the first step in a 3-step process, because the next step is all about building a personal learning backpack. And what's that? That's really sort of the skills and the tools that I need to be able to support a strength or a challenge I have, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
then in the end, you want to develop a plan because, so so we have a personal learning plan in the end. So I want to be able to do this. So let's develop a plan around that. So there's of course templates around creating plans around access, engage, and express, but also a template around college and career planning, or maybe you want to do something maybe you want to do some advocacy work, or something that you want a real personal goal. But, it's all, and really helping kids to set goals and actions around their goals. That, and, the thing is that that's that skill that you can have for a complete lifetime, right?
Right.
Setting goals, and how do you set goals and write actions around it? And then how do you reflect around, once you've done that? And what it is that kids don't really get these opportunities to work on things like skills, right? And skill development. It's all about academics. It's not about skill development. Okay, it's around to support your learning. It's really around, we have to get to a test and we have to take a test and blah blah blah, whatever. But the thing is that in the end, the kid has to have skills to be able to support their learning. And we don't focus on that in education. I'm always hoping that, one day, someday, someone, will say, and I've been involved in the learner-centered movement for quite a few years now, and we want kids to be able to focus around their learning and the skills that they need to support their learning. And but that's sort of like, okay, well, maybe, because even when I was working with the very young teachers with in K to 1, they were sort of bent on like, where do I find the time? Because every minute of the day is taken up around academics. So this is a sad story, in education, is that we haven't taken that time to allocate for kids to develop skills around their learning, because learning is a personal practice. Just think about that, and how do you develop that? We're kind of cheating kids by not doing that, and I'm always hoping to be able to change the world, and I've been working at this for quite a long time. But the thing is that, and unless we do that, okay, kids are never going to get to that level of self advocacy that they really need to get to. You know, again, I think we started off like you can't really go to college and to self advocate if in fact you don't know how to do that, if you don't understand who you are as a learner at all. And to be able to go and get the things that you need to be successful. And again, even in work environment, right? I mean, you need certain things,
Yes.
to really to thrive in both in the work environment and in school. And if kids, all kids have hopes and dreams. And if someone was to say, why do you do this? Is because I want kids to realize hopes and dreams. This is my whole focus. Lots of kids never get there because they never really get to realize who they are as learners and as individuals. So
Yeah, and
that's
I think
my
that's a good point. I mean, some don't, and it's
no,
just
some don't, and
and they
that
don't.
it's really sad because we want kids to be uh, as educators, we want kids to be successful in life, really. um I don't ever forget being a classroom teacher, and when I'm always working, I'm always thinking, as a practitioner, I'm always in that mode. And what would a practitioner need, and how could I help them become better practitioners in the classroom, um, with all kids. And um, and I think that right now, I think we're in a really critical point because I think lots of kids are really struggling. And we talk about the level, the anxiety. I mean, I said to myself, I said saying to my husband, that was a term that was never used in my entire childhood. Anxiety was not even something even heard of, even in my early adulthood. So, so the thing but I think we've recreated this culture, especially with all the social media, and that kids have developed a lot of anxiety, and they don't really know how to communicate about themselves. So, anyone that wants to contact me, please do, by the way. And I'd be glad to have conversations with you around this whole idea of the empowered learner profile and the need for that. And so um, I still work at this really pretty much every day, and
And we are very
try
thankful
try
you
trying to
do.
make it better, trying to make it better, and try to make it more inclusive, and so that we're reaching all kids. And so that's what I'm working on this particular year.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was gonna say is like what you got coming up. But I mean, it's really interesting. People always think like I make something, I'm done with it. I'm like, no, there's always change, always different. I think you did a perfect thing. I have a student that can do a TikTok, but then you ask them to do a video recording of their introduction. Like, I can't do that. I don't like hearing the voice I speak. Like, yet I hear you you show me a video where you were speaking with a background music and you sounded fine. Well, I'm like, that's going to what? 400, whatever people are following your friends. Yet you and me,
Right,
you can't send something to just me where I'll watch it. Like, well, I sound weird. It's like, but it's just you and me
right,
versus you just did something that went out to like 90 people. It's like I'd
right,
like
right.
to understand where that difference is, but I think it is a very good point on how that is. And it's true. I mean, I had anxiety too. People didn't really talk about it, but later on they found that out. I mean, my
Right,
own son has anxiety, but it was something they were able to look at. I mean, it wasn't that it wasn't there, but the trick is I think people were a
right,
difference between people who had experienced it and people who didn't really experienced it. It's like
right.
it's like they said, like I don't. It's like the in-law who says, "Well, none of my kids had problems sleeping at night." Like, but those were your kids. Those are not. my kids. Maybe there was a
Yeah,
difference.
the thing was is that, we, as a kid growing up, we always had lots of friends, and we had lots of people to talk to. I think that kids sometimes isolate themselves today. And back then, like, we were sharing before we got on, just what that life was like, right? And but I'm actually on Facebook with, kids I knew for the last 70 years of my life. So, it's like um, we're we've had an opportunity really to work more like a community, you see, back then, because we were in classrooms that were like 35 kids in a class, and teachers really relied on other kids to help other children, and so we always had this sense of community in the classroom that we were there really to help each other out all the time, and I think it's a little bit different today, and that's what we did. We were just, kind to other kids. We were just good to each other, and that's, we don't have the same influences that kids have today.
Hmm.
And I would definitely, keep kids away from social media for as long as you can, and then just let it be piecemeal. I see this conversation all the time on all these different talk shows, and I don't watch a lot of talk shows, but when you're listening to some of them, there seems to be some struggle around, kids really being isolated, being, alone. And there's not that sense of community that I knew as a kid, and that we all were going to help each other, right, to be better.
Right.
Um, and that was what we did because, think about 35 kids in a class, a teacher in fourth or fifth or sixth grade, right? And I remember staying after school to help kids how to do math, to read. I walked to school, so I was pretty accessible. But teachers actually used, kids to tutor other children, and that's how I just remember. And I think that's probably why, in the end, I became a teacher and wanted to be a teacher because I was doing that at a pretty young age.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, like I said, mine was always there, but like I said, I think I had more of the less of influence too versus when I was, but I was always
Mhm.
helping everybody. I was always trying to help others too. I mean, I had a
Oh yeah,
situation days
yeah,
ago where I was learning a new program and I was kind of lost and a couple people helped me with it. But then once
right,
that I fumbled my way through, I started helping other people with it too, because that's just
yeah,
how I
right,
am. I'm very,
yeah. I
I'm a
mean,
very helpful
really,
person. I've had
yeah.
people say very horrible things to me, and then 2 days later, I'm helping them. I mean, I'm just
Yeah,
naturally a helpful
I
person.
mean, we're we're in we're all here on the planet, you know. Why, and one of the things that sort of drove me to become an entrepreneur was that I just thought I could do have a greater impact outside of the K to 12, being a K to 12 administrator, and so I again became an entrepreneur, but um, the big question is that why are we here, right?
Yeah,
And how can we make a difference? Because we all have to make this a better place, right, for the next generation and the generations to follow. And I think that should be our focus: is how we really make this a better place for everyone. And I know that's but when you answer those questions, when you decide that you can contribute in a certain way, and let that be your purpose in life, you see. But it's a huge commitment because you have I work at this every day, and I'm committed to really making this a better place than and a better and better for all children. So that's one of the the focuses of my life, and I tell people I live a life of purpose, and it really contributes to my mental health, and my physical health, and so I just want people to know that just discover how you would like to make a difference in the lives of anyone, and just focus on that. And you're going to have it's going to be highly rewarding in the end. It's a lot of work, but it's highly rewarding. Um, and like I said to you at the beginning, is that I could have never written the script of what I've done over the last 25 years of my life. I could have never written the script. And I'm always, so I have time now to sort of reflect on that. And I think everyone should always sort of take that moment and reflect on their own life and how they're contributing to make this a better world, you know, um, because that really should be, one of the focuses in your life. If you like to be an entrepreneur too,
Yeah.
for sure. But
I,
but
yeah.
it's what drives you in the end. Okay, that allows you to become an entrepreneur for the long term.
Wow. I gotta say, Catherine, it's kind of flown by for this last hour, but I mean, you've very been enriching, and for someone who kind of got into this, on a whim and didn't know a thing, and talk about, like I said, decade later, see, but you've been a very big influence to me and many other educators and a few other things, and you continue to
I
be.
hope so.
And I love the
I hope
message of
so.
trying to make things, but
Well,
try
uh,
to make us a better, make us a better place in the long run, which I agree
yeah,
is what
yeah.
is the point of immunity, and really throws what the Pixel Classroom is about and everything. And like, especially that last L, leadership. Where are you? Sometimes it's just making those small ripples that do pay off in the long run.
That's right. That's right. And I really have enjoyed, having this conversation with you. I want to learn how to do a podcast, so maybe one day that you can teach me how to do that
I'm
because
more than happy.
I'm
I got
I'm
plenty of people. I mean, even Wesley Freier's got a whole little book on how to start a podcast.
I know Wesley.
Yeah,
I
so
met
you just
Wesley. Oh
contact him.
God,
You two would
20 years ago, I think I met Wesley. Oh God, longer than
I
that.
probably met him in
I
person
mean,
in
I you know
I've known him
I
from 2012. So
I sort of, uh, I mean, I don't go to a lot of conferences anymore. I like to do them virtually. But I mean, but the thing is, I've met just about anyone who was anyone in the ed tech world over the last 35 years. And it's been a great ride, I'll tell you.
I
So,
can see it now. Make learning personal podcasts. It's like the EDU protocols podcast, or whatever
okay,
it's called,
okay.
the Kathleen McClaskey show.
No, I just think it's about I think it's about empowerment, and then
There you go.
thing
The Make Learning Personal Empowerment podcast. See, we're getting ideas already. See,
there you go. There
this is
you
why
go. So
this
yeah.
is why I love my podcast.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I could learn something from you for sure. So
I'd be
you
more
could
than
teach me
happy.
something.
I mean, you know how to get a hold of me. I'd be more than happy to email you and go from there. Start the small stuff before
Okay,
being like
okay.
this here, where I have the big parts here. There's a lot.
I would just love, to do podcasts with all these educators I've known, and I like just to take the people I've known again over the last many decades that I've been in this ed tech world, and just interview them because so many of the people that are like, either past retirement or even before retirement. I mean, people in the last 20, 30 years that have been in this field have contributed so much to education and I've been just so fortunate to know so many and to associate with, so but I'm still doing the work
Yeah.
every day.
We thank you
Yeah.
for doing that work and the fact that you're not done. So, all this on, Kathleen, like, how can people get a hold of you besides, hitting the show notes in our little areas here?
Well, they can send me emails. They can reach me on X. I don't do a lot of tweets, but I am there, KHMMC. And you can reach me, of course, by email at kmcclaskey@gmail.com. I think I have that. And if you could have that in the podcast,
Oh yeah, I mean,
that
I
they
got it
can
here
reach
on my
me.
little scrolling, like here, my little
Okay.
ticker, and that'll be all in the
Uh,
information on the final audio next week when this drops.
okay.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I got you
Sounds
covered.
good.
I got you covered. I do my research. That's why I was able to go through your website, and actually when you talked about, like, I'm going to click here now, or what was? Oh yeah, it was right here. See, I did my research
Right.
before we started this.
Oh, no, no, that's, thank you for, yeah, I think you did a fabulous job
Oh,
actually. So,
thank you, thank you.
yeah.
I mean, some days I don't know if I'm doing this as something to like I said, and people know this from when I talked to Darren Pepper the other day. It's like sometimes we'll do these live feeds. We'll get one, or like I've had 2 people popping in and out here the entire live feed, and I went to do a comment like, "Sorry, everybody, with the dogs feed," but I was like, "Wait, that was supposed to go to Kathleen and tell her privately." That's why I keep looking up the dogs barking. I'm like texting my son, like, "Bring her in, bring her in." It's like, what's going on here?
I really appreciate it because a lot of times when you get to this particular age, it seems like that people forget who you are, and that obviously something happens as you get further into the decades, right? But I feel like I'm the same person that many years ago when I started in this field in 1983. And I one of the important things always, especially when using tools in the classroom, is really to develop a vision around it. About how you want to be able to use these things with kids. And I saw computers because the word technology didn't exist in 1983 in common language. But I saw computers as the great equalizer, and they are. Technology is the great equalizer.
Yep, and like I said,
Yep.
that's a perfect one, I think. So, Kathleen, thank you so much for being on here. Thank you for telling us
Okay.
your story and the fact that you're still out there doing it, and we got the communication because I gotta say, people like me and other ones out, even new educators, we're better because of people like you. And thank you for doing all this work and still continuing to do this work.
All right. So let me know. I can let me put your podcast out on my websites, and so
Oh,
when
I
it's
will.
ready. Yeah. Okay.
And
All
we'll be
right.
all right, everybody else. Thank you for joining us today on the Pixel Classroom podcast, and we'll see everyone later.
Okay.